That's right. When you don't know what to do, just keep on breathing. The City of Angels in Los Angeles. Welcome to all my listeners and guests out there in Radioland. I'm Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver at caregiverdave.com, along with my lovely co-host, Debbie Peterson, mayor of a California beach town and a best-selling author. Also coming to you live and on demand 24/7 on numerous syndicated radio and podcast networks, on 26 global audio and video platforms, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Vimeo, Stitcher Radio, Blog Talk Radio. My gosh, the list goes on and on. In fact, we are proud to be voted #1 caregiver podcast on FeedSpot out of thousands and #1 caregiver podcast of the top 50 on Player FM. And we have an especially exciting show planned for you today. Heather Fink started performing stand-up comedy in New York City in 2005 and continued making funny videos, doing improv and sketch comedy. Day jobs included PR for a gay porn company, Senator Kennedy Intern, and content strategy for digital media. In 2009, she began NYU's Grad film program as writer-director. She currently pays the bills as a sound person for film and TV, including Marvel's Daredevil and Hulu's The Dropout, and much more. We'll get to that in a moment. But before we get started, I do want to thank my last week's guest, Ariel Ford, gifted writer and author of 12 books, including her debut novel, The Love Thief, romantic spiritual thriller. And just a reminder, you can watch or listen to that interview and all our interviews on our membership website, caregiverdave.com, or any of our other 26 global audio video networks that I mentioned earlier. Okay, enough of that. Heather, so great to have you on the Caregiver Dave show.
Yes, thank you. Happy to be here.
Hey, I always like to ask my guests just who is Heather Fink and why was she placed on this earth?
Oh, wow. I would say my youngest instinct has always been with comedy, whether it was making jokes and just to tell stories. So I hope that I can take the crazy things I've experienced in this world and tell stories that connect to other people in a positive or helpful way.
And I have one thing in common with you. I too did a 5-minute stand-up set at the Harvard Club of New York, doing some comedy. Now, I don't normally do comedy, but I'm a pretty guy, some have said. And so I scoured the internet looking for jokes that would make me laugh out loud and not just chuckle or smile. And I came up with a few of them, and then I weaved it into this personal story that I had, and they loved it. And so I could cross that off my bucket list. And anytime I see open mic, I stop in. But so far, I'm always just before they open or right after they close. So maybe one day.
Yeah, maybe one day. That's still, I think it's probably more brave to do it when you don't do it as often. So kudos to you.
But, it's a scary, scary thing. I mean, I'm a public speaker, and that's scary. I mean, what is it? 90% of the greatest fear is public speaking. But public speaking is nothing compared to standing in front of a group of people that you expect to make laugh. So you look like a pretty brave person.
Well, thank you. Yeah, people
I don't think we've ever had.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just saying, Dave, have we ever had a comedian on this show, apart from you, of course?
I have had a couple on before I brought you on as a co-host. They were pretty funny too. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, really? Well, I'm here to talk
no
about
pressure though.
More dark, so I don't know.
Not here to necessarily make us laugh.
But I will say that a lot of times people say, "Oh, I could never do stand-up. That's so scary." And I think, well, that just came naturally for me. I would be terrified to play sports in front of people. I could never be an athlete. So everyone has their own thing that they're naturally inclined to, and for some people, stand-up is just for me, it's an extension of the kind of person I am. So
yeah, and I know a lot of funny people who feel that way. Oh, I could never do that. But you just have to get organized, memorize some jokes, and practice your delivery. And I mean, that's how it works, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So tell us about your caregiver story. What makes you a caregiver, and what makes you an expert in the caregiving field? Even if you don't think you are, because 90% more than anybody else.
Well, I've really been through it starting when I was 29 years old, which was in 2010. My dad had a severe stroke, and he was left mostly paralyzed with some mobility on one side, which people listening to your podcast, I'm sure, are familiar with a lot of them. And he had aphasia and apraxia and could only speak three to five words: yes, no, okay. It was mostly okay, and hi and bye. And so it was he had very intense caregiving needs. This was in New Jersey. I live in LA now, but I used to live in New York City, and I would come home and absolutely participated in his care. My mom was his primary caregiver. Everything happened in the home. We both couldn't afford nursing home or anything like that. And for his condition, the fact that he neither could move or walk or could talk, he couldn't really socialize with people in a setting like that. So we all felt it would not be a proper thing for him, but it wasn't even an option because we couldn't afford it. So, so that happened. And there's other aspects of caregiving in my life. My grandmother was schizophrenic, and she lived with us from when I was 13 until I was in college. And then later in life, I mean, this is a whole other crazy story, but my dad's older brother was also schizophrenic, and he was long lost for 50 years in the system. And I finally tracked him down in 2018. And because of all these other circumstances, I became his point of care. Wow. So for example, my dad did pass away last June. So it's been almost a year, but while he was dying, I was signing hospice paperwork for that uncle, even though he was in another state. Like, that was the only point of contact. So I had that on my plate. And then my mom was very impacted by being a longtime caregiver. And so right after my dad passed, my mom finally took care of herself and got her knees replaced one at a time. And so I took care of her when she got her knees replaced. And then on top of that, I also wore myself down and have serious knee issues that I'm now in physical therapy for. So these are long cycles of caregiving.
You don't look old enough to have health problems and to have parents who are old enough to die and all that stuff. Are you
sunscreen? Sunscreen and hydration.
Sunscreen and hydration.
Yeah.
So
well,
you made a show out of all this, a comedy show, I'm assuming.
Yes. Well, yes, there's comedy, and it's also fairly dark because I do tell the story of my dad's stroke, and I tell the story of his death as well. And in the middle of it, there's sort of a storytelling sandwich to the show. And in the middle, I do these unusual theatrical things, but I do actually do something that I would call like a Charlie Chaplin-ish demonstration of caregiving.
Wow.
So I physically perform it because I felt once I sort of try to tell the story to the audience of what happened, for me to go through the years of stories of struggle and all of this is harder. What if I help them understand a feeling?
Yeah. How creative. What did you do before all of this that you're drawing on all this creativity?
Well, I've been a filmmaker for a long time in different ways. In my 20s, I'm not really an active comedian anymore. I performed mostly in my 20s, mostly in New York City. And I did, sketch comedy and made funny videos in the early days of the internet. I was like a blogger then, and I always had a day job. And then the economy crashed in 2008, and I had no income, so I went to film school at NYU. And then I've been making all these independent films for the last decade or so and gotten really close to a big break, but then something crazy happened that it didn't go through. But every year I try to pick myself up again and come up with a new project. And I've been wanting to tell the story of what my family has gone through for a really long time. I wrote a feature film about it. I think it's the worst script I ever wrote because I have no objectivity. It's so personal. So that was years ago, and I've been transforming it. I transformed into what I think it should be, a television show. And then I decided after my dad's passed, I need to just pick myself up, and I want to do a live show because I can just do that. It doesn't cost as much money to put on a live show. I'm just going to get up there. I'm going to do it. I care so much about there's caregivers are invisible. Caregivers are invisible, like that especially, but it's also to me about the work that women do, a lot of it. I know there's male caregivers too. Women over 40 are often invisible. All this stuff, like I want to tell this story. Elder care is often not talked about enough either. I have to give voice to what so many people are going through. So here's how I'm going to start with this show.
You remind me of that song, Pick
That's
Myself
wonderful.
Up, Dust Myself Off, Start All Over Again. Good for you. Debbie, you got any questions?
Well, I'm enthralled by the whole idea. And so when you say you're going to do a story, does that mean you're going to do more stand-up comedy on that again?
Well, actually, no. I want to develop this further for television. So the live show is called Quicksand, and I first had the idea for television and then adapted it to the stage. And it's called Quicksand because as I was going through all of this difficulty and challenge in my family with caregiving, I often felt I was sinking in quicksand. Every time and I think a lot of caregivers can identify with that. Like every time I'm like, oh, I'm having this career opportunity, I'm trying to move forward, then something would happen and it would pull me back in again. And I felt like I was sinking. And so that was something that was very organic creatively for me to call it Quicksand and think about that. For the television version, it would be a family, I'm calling a traumedy. If you've heard of a dramedy, it's like a fusion. So it's like a traumedy. And in that show, I imagine there's this space in this world. And I think about it kind of like, Ally McBeal, the TV show, she would like see dancing babies and things. It's not exactly a dream. It's more like this surrealist element. And I wanted in my family drama there to be this like not dream space exactly, but to work out my emotional reality. For example, in this space, I could talk to some version of my dad. Maybe he's like a puppet or claymation or something, but like I wanted there to be this like space that exists in every show. So on the stage version, there is a puppet version of a life-size, like large puppet version of my dad who I do sort of something with in the show. And so I hope with the show, I'm so glad I did it because when I was trying to develop the TV show, so much was just in my head. And working through this, I've gone so much deeper creatively, story-wise, with the heart of the story, that I think it'll make whatever happens next much better. So I'm doing, this Hollywood Fringe show I'm doing in June is what I hope is a first run. I hope to keep doing it again. I want to bring it to New York, maybe next year to the Edinburgh Fringe in Scotland. I want to keep doing the show. I want it to get better. I want to more deeply, creatively explore the themes. And yeah, I want to make a TV show. And there's one more thing on top of the TV show is that I do hope by bringing attention to these issues, I could translate that into creating a better philanthropy or charity for people to have the resources we wish we had but didn't. That's the big goal.
I get so excited when people doing weird, strange, creative, unique stuff. I bet you they're doing a lot of one-person shows on Broadway. Is Broadway possibly your goal as well?
I mean, there are a couple musical numbers there's no time for in this because the Fringe show is 1 hour. So if I made it like an hour and a half, I could do more. Maybe I'm thinking like maybe off Broadway. If this goes well, yeah, sure. I'm sure I'll have to keep doing it for a while to be that quality of a show, but I'd love that. That sounds great.
I don't know if you know it. There was a football player. I can't think of his name right now, but he messed his knees up, but he was very successful. And he got a lot of training from actors and stage actors. And he did a one-man show on Broadway, and it was very famous. I'm sorry, I can't even think of the guy.
Oh, that's great.
Now he runs a very successful speaking career. People bring him in and pay him a lot of money to do stuff. So there's no telling where this.
That's true. So I really think of this Hollywood Fringe show as a first run. I still got to get butts in the seats to see it because there's 5 whole shows. And that helps make it good. So even though it's a first run, I think the excitement for the audience is, hey, we get to see this thing and it's like early incarnation. And I really hope that I can keep doing it in bigger and better forms, and it can maybe get even flashier. One of the musical numbers that does it, that's not in the show, that I hope to do in the future, actually is about caregiving, but it's a bit of a song about all the things people think that people get as caregivers, like about all the things that people imagine or have a fantasy, like, oh yeah, you just have an aide and you have all this stuff and you know how many resources. So as I'm saying it out loud, I think you probably just have to hear it. It's hard to describe.
You're a singer also.
Well, not actively, but it's,
will you
yeah.
be singing in the show?
If I, not in the show I'm doing in June, but I was just thinking about in the future that I'd want to. But I was a classically trained singer, but that's a bit out of shape. But I could do a number for this. And comedy, you know, it doesn't have to be Celine Dion level.
No. Got anything?
So where is the show again in June?
Oh, yeah. So at the Hollywood Fringe Festival. So it's at a theater called the Hudson Theaters. And I think if people just look up Quicksand Heather Fink or look up Quicksand Hollywood Fringe, they'll be able to get a ticket if they want to come.
Yeah, I'd come. I'm not that far from Hollywood.
Oh, great. That's wonderful.
Hollywood Fringe.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I have a question about comedy. I guess you said you were doing comedy before your dad had the stroke. I certainly found with my family when we were caregiving for my mother that a sense of humor made all the difference. And we joked about dark things a lot, and it made it easier. So I'm just wondering if you had that same experience. Obviously you did comedy about it, but was it helpful in your family situation?
Absolutely. And I'll say that I never really did comedy about it. I was too sad. I stopped doing comedy I stopped doing stand-up right after my dad had a stroke. I felt like when I got on stage, I felt like I was treating the audience like they were my therapist, and I was like, I'm going to stop. Now that's more popular to be more personal in comedy, but back in 2010, it wasn't really. But the humor in our family absolutely helped us get through it. I think about, my mom. So my dad's, bowel area was partially paralyzed. And so when he'd go to the restroom, it'd be a large deposit. And she had this sword, like what she had this metal thing she would use to chop it up. And she sang a song while she would do it, like humming and laughing, because it's, of course, a very yucky thing to do. And so much of caregiving is about bathroom stuff. There's so many memories I have of stuff flying everywhere, missing the commode, falling on the floor, and many swears being dropped. And there maybe be yelling or frustration, but also absolutely laughter. And my dad, he was a big guy and he couldn't speak, but I just know he would make jokes however he could. For example, I remember he used to hide behind a coffee mug that's way too small for his face, whatever little jokes. And humor was such a bit it was so hard what my mom had to do and what we were going through, that there's no way we could have gotten through it and felt, I think that without humor, you'd lose touch with your sense of love and your sense of of being alive. So your ability to joke through it instead of just being so dragged down. I mean, how else can you deal? I remember the first time that I had to wipe my own dad's butt, and I learned about how you have to pull the family jewels forward before he sits, or else he's going to sit on them. And there was this moment I had to they took a tissue and I had to pull him forward, and we just looked in each other's eyes and laughed, because, well, that's not a position he ever wanted me to be in, and I never wanted to. It was just very ridiculous. And the situations you can get in with caregiving can be they're so unnatural. There's nothing that prepares you for it. There's a lot of laughter to be had through it all. Yes.
Yeah, I prepared all my granddaughters. I says, one day you will have to change my diaper as I'm changing theirs, And so they're prepared and they know all about it. And they say, well, we're just going to stick you in a nursing home I says, well, if you do, I want to be in Malibu. It's just, we'll tell you when you're in Pacoima, you'll think you're in Malibu. And I mean, that's what I'm dealing with here. But let's talk about the stroke, because your dad and my wife have a lot in common, except she's still alive after he's 27 years. But
Wow.
she's paralyzed on the right side, has aphasia. She knows about 12 words.
Wow.
And, but she is like Martha Stewart, Wonder Woman, all rolled into one. An encouragement that people who see it, because she can do more than most normal people. How do you spot a stroke? I mean, with her, it was a headache. It was a 3-day headache that she kind of was hoping it would go away, but it didn't.
I mean, I always want to teach people any chance I get, FAST, face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty, time to call 911. For my dad, at the time, my parents were really stressed out. There was issues with my mom's job, and my dad was helping. They were going to build out the downstairs, like this den, into a room they could rent out. So they were doing construction stuff. And my dad, his blood pressure was out of control. And we didn't know, first of all, the connection between blood pressure and stroke. We didn't fully understand. And he also had sleep apnea, which would cut off his oxygen sleeping at night. And that we think is because he was a healthy man otherwise. And we think that's probably the cause. He was 68 when it happened. And so when it happened to him, I think he just kind of like sat and like collapsed on the couch and is like face drooping. And it was my mom that was there with him, and she didn't know what was happening and thought he was having like a heart attack. So she tried to give him an aspirin, and she took probably longer to call 911 than she should have, because she had no idea what was happening.
Well, what did you learn about the dying process? I mean,
the dying process. Yeah, well, I learned a lot. One of the more interesting things in talking about the dying process that I learned, that it's not such a dark thing. I go to something called Death Cafe. Have you heard of it?
Yes, I had a guest on who kind of started that.
Oh, really? Wow. Well, I love it. I go to one in Los Feliz, and I absolutely love it. It's run by a death doula named Elizabeth, who's wonderful. And I found, well, first I started listening to Anderson Cooper's Grief podcast. And then I went to Death Cafe, but I found conversations on death often always connect to life and love, so you can feel happy afterwards. And what I guess the reason I want to talk about it is there were so many things I witnessed in my dad's natural death that put me in a state of awe. And I thought what I witnessed was miraculous in a very intense way. Yeah, I was in awe of what I witnessed.
It's probably the most intimate thing and the most spiritual thing that you'll ever have in your life. And it's a huge privilege to be able to be there for someone, with someone, when they pass.
Yeah, I absolutely felt that way. It was a pretty like drawn out, dramatic, on this day, this kind of the Cheyne-Stokes breathing and like all these things that I could just Google, and it was talked about at length on the internet, but it's not in movies. We just show, silly murder type of dramatic deaths, but we do not depict natural.
Bang, bang.
Yeah, bang, bang. And we don't show the steps of dying, which I thought, like, when his hospice nurse said really point blank, like, oh yeah, he's in between the real world and the spiritual world now. And I was like, he is? Okay. And it was very clear to me that there was something miraculous going on as his soul was preparing to leave his body. And it was beautiful and intense, the whole thing. Like, when it was his time, it was his time. And I mean, the most beautiful thing that happened during that week actually was, no matter how nosy I could be looking through things, we were looking for photos for his funeral because we knew it was upon us. And I've got a cat approaching the camera almost. Sorry. We were looking for photos, and I found my dad's original love letters to my mom from 1968. And I had no idea. They were so loving and sweet and amazing. And I had no idea these letters still existed, and that he ever spoke to her in such an intensely loving way. It was really beautiful. And so the last picture I have of him was when I showed him the letters, and he read them, and it was really a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah. When so many caregivers have trouble determining when they should take the keys away from mom's car or dad's car, but also when it's time to put them in a facility. Now, my wife just had surgery, rotacuff surgery, and her right side's paralyzed, but now her left side is immobilized. And so she was in a nursing home for supposed to be 6 weeks. She couldn't take it after 3 weeks. She convinced the doctor, send me home. I can't sleep. There's someone crazy down the hall saying, help, 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 every 5 seconds and stuff. And so I was very hesitant, being the smart caregiver that I am, but I really felt sorry for her. I said, okay, well, if this doesn't work out, we're going back, And so we were very careful. It was so hard transferring, though, because it's all on me. And so we were doing the bedpan thing instead. And, that was okay. And it was getting better. And I was getting used to it. And then she says, let me try, the toilet again. And it started working. So now she's doing the toilet. So she must be getting stronger up there. She's still not supposed to do it, but her legs are stronger and everything. But how do you know when it's time? And, maybe you're not getting any sleep. And maybe it is time to put your needs first. What do you think?
Well, we never did. So there were times when he had to go to the hospital. I mean, a lot of times he had to go to the hospital. There was one time he was in a nursing home for a month because, with the physical therapy, we would work on his strength and transitioning in and out of the chair. And he had some issues where we couldn't even transition him. And he's a big guy. But it's always been so exhausting for him to be in the hospital or nursing home, because we then have to keep going there and he can't communicate for themselves. And the nursing home would never remember basic things like, they'd put like a sign up of like, okay, he can't be getting to the bathroom by himself. And we're like, that would be awesome if he could get to the bathroom by himself. Not going to be an issue. Like, he's huge, he's paralyzed, he's not going anywhere. But the whole month he was there, they never showered him. And this was like supposed to be a nice place. So while it's been good, sometimes when he was in the hospital for like a week or two, for example, we were able to go to a wedding. It happened right when he was in the hospital he was in like a nursing home for extra care, because we were able to go for a weekend to a wedding because someone else was able to take care of him. So that actually was helpful. But we had him in the home in the end. And once he was on hospice, and he was on hospice for a while, because we learned with my grandma, like, say yes to hospice early as possible. It just means extra help. But we put the hospital bed in the bedroom, like next to my mom and dad's bed. And so people were coming. So he passed at home, because for us, the family, it's unpleasant being in the hospital. But I also know that my dad, this happened around 68 and he passed at the age of 80. And I know that if you've been doing this for 27 years and your wife is maybe a little younger, she might have more abilities. She might have a better quality of life. Like, I don't know her specific circumstances. For my family, staying home was the answer. But for other families, you may have a totally different set of circumstances where that's the right thing. And, you need respite, you need the respite also. So
I can't believe how fast the time is going. I've got so many things I wanted to ask you, but I'll let you decide. The last comment that you'd like to make, what would you like to talk about? I mean, is there a book coming out or something that you were hoping we would talk about and didn't get to?
No, I really appreciate what we did talk about. People can go and see Quicksand at the Hollywood Fringe Festival. If you just look up Quicksand and Hollywood Fringe. My name is Heather Fink, and I hope that I get the opportunity to tell these stories.
And are you on YouTube at all, where we can get little hints, teasers, or trailers?
I've been there's a cat. I post a lot on Instagram at Leather Fink, and it's a good idea. I should not neglect my YouTube, but I am on YouTube, probably Heather Fink on YouTube. Yes.
And Heather Fink on Instagram?
Leather Fink on Instagram.
Leather, Leather.
Yeah, I wore leather pants in high school, got a nickname.
I see. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And time is the enemy. How can listeners reach you if they want to learn more about you or maybe ask some caregiver questions since you're the expert? Have an email?
Absolutely.
Or
Sure. Heatherfink.com has my email right there.
Great. Debbie, how can people get a hold of you? Find out what you do for a living to help people.
Well, the best way is actually mayordebbie.com, and that will forward to wherever I'm working on whatever at the time. So, or you can go to Amazon and get The Happiest Corruption, Sleaze, Lies, and Suicide in a California Beach Town if you want a riveting true story.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yes, mayordebbie.com. My number one best-selling book, it's Your Life Too, How to Thrive as a Caregiver, is helping people all over the world. It's available wherever books are sold. Also on my free membership website, caregiverdave.com, where you can also schedule a free 30-minute initial coaching call, talk about whatever you're struggling with. I also invite you to my Caregiver Dave Facebook community of 34,000 caregivers. Lots of tools, resources, videos, this radio show, and much, much more. And if you click the like or follow button on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this interview on, it helps us reach even more caregivers by improving Google's search engine algorithms. We don't want to disappoint them. So thank you again, all my listeners out there, my guests, my co-hosts, everyone. The world is a better place, I think, because of our website. If you are not a caregiver, just wait. You'll either become one or need one. It's inevitable. So thanks for tuning in every Wednesday, making us the #1 caregiver podcast and radio show on the internet. So until next week, same time, same channel. Hey, may God richly bless you all. Bye-bye.
Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing.